What's shaking, cats and kittens? Rob Lee here for this month's presenting sponsor, Night Owl Gallery. Night Owl Gallery is an intimate, artist-run exhibition space showcasing the original paintings and fine art prints of Beth Ann Wilson. Also, it features curated goods from local artists and craftsmen. You'll be sure to find one-of-a-kind gifts, handcrafted jewelry, home decor items, along with a few vintage treasures. Located in the rear of 248 South Conklin Street in Highlandtown, across from the Sally O's, Night Owl Gallery is a unique space that brings together Wilson's love of the arts, community, and culture. Additionally, Night Owl Gallery hosts an array of arts and crafts workshops throughout the year and participates in community events, many of which are free and open to the public. So in this ever-changing world, safety is their priority. So feel free to join them and hit them up online at www.nightowl.gallery. Tell them Rob Lee sent you. Welcome to Getting to the Truth in This Art. I am your host, Rob Lee, and my next guest is a Baltimore-based artist who captures everyday scenes of the African diaspora. We have Schroeder Cherry. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
Yes. Thank you for making the time and coming to this lovely little thing we call Getting to the Truth in This Art. So, as is custom, I'd like to ask my guests what their background is creatively. So I won't make anything different here. What is your background? What is your creative interest and your artistic background?
Okay. Well, I am what you would call an arts kid. I grew up playing with crayons. Those were my favorite toys. I was always drawing and sketching. I also played with marbles and puppets. In high school, I had a chance to study art, in a more formal way. I was a part of what they called workshops for careers in the arts. And that's the precursor to what is now the Duke Ellington School in Washington, D.C. Before the school, there were a group of visionaries, primarily Peggy Cooper-Capritz and Mike Malone. Mike was from Howard University and Peggy was working in the law school at GW. They put together this amazing program that drew kids from all over DC and introduced them to the performing and visual arts. So I was exposed to that early on.
That's fantastic. Getting in there early. I don't think it may have been once or twice that I've actually said this on this 150th episode, I suppose, that I was kind of in one of those spots, super young and kind of being exposed to just different things early artistically. And it was like drawing manuals and, hey, here's this book, here's these color pencils, here's some crayons. I was like, oh, this is great. And having more of an interest in it. I had a few toys, but having more of an interest in that area and worked on a few murals as a kid and ruined my glasses. So my parents were not happy about that. And but I did a few different things. And so it's really good to hear that it was one of those really early starts for you.
Were you good at coloring books? I was not.
Here's the thing.
I'm an iconoclast with coloring books.
Here's the thing. I'm an iconoclast. I only drew outside of the lines.
Okay, yeah, we were in the same class. I could not stick within those lines. And now as an adult, looking back at those books, I realized how badly designed they were for kids, period. The spaces were small. The lines were just not designed for a kid's hand or imagination. But later there was a crop of books that came out, the anti-coloring book, which basically eliminates the lines. So you've got all this space on a page to express your imagination there. And I thought, well, this is what I should have had as a kid. Yeah, I get this.
Yeah. The one thing I did do, and it kind of showed, because mostly it was color pencils for me. It was weird. Like, you have a teacher, they're really overzealous and they're like, hey, we see that you did something creatively. So I would draw this comic, the whole thing, inking, penciling, the whole thing, and doing all the coloring. I was like, this is not colored well. And I was working on it. I would always rush through my tests so I can work on my comic book or whatever drawing I was doing. And I think the teacher came over there, and this is after a week that I had a test, and I had this really cool drawing of like Wolverine from the X-Men. And I remember she threw it away, and I was like, I'm mad right now. So I'm obviously very protective of this comic that I'm working on because it's my baby. So she saw it and she was like, oh my gosh. And she got it laminated and it became like a big thing around my middle school. And I still actually have it to this day. It was like one of my failed dreams of being a comic book guy. I might go back into it though. Okay. So you touched on crayons, marbles, puppets. Describe some of those initial sources of inspiration for how you kind of use some of those implements.
Initial, you mean influences?
Yes.
I was always drawn to pictures, I guess. I had a cousin who was interested in cars and, friends who were interested in cars. And I thought, well, to be a true little boy, I should be interested in cars. I just couldn't. It just didn't hold my interest, but I could really get excited about big pictures or photographs of foreign places. I actually went out and bought a car set because plastic model cars were popular when I was a kid. So I went out and bought a car set. Man, I opened that car set and the colors were just so ugly. I was depressed. I mean, it was just this ugly gray green thing made out of plastic with all these parts that you had to break apart and then put together. And I thought, okay, I really do not like this. These colors are just bad. They're just bad. So I was always influenced by things that are around me. Growing up in DC, I was also had access to museums and they were free because Smithsonian was a federal museum. I found myself wandering around Smithsonian. Even as a kid, I tended to wander when I was a kid in DC. So I would, without telling my parents, I would get on a bus and travel to other parts of the city, just kind of walk around into other neighborhoods. And one day I found myself down on the mall. And I was in what I now know is the National Gallery of Art. Just kind of walking around the halls and thinking, wow, this is a great place. So those are my early influences there.
Yeah, traveling, seeing the world, traveling locally, obviously, but seeing the world and like recognizing like I don't like that color. I prefer better colors.
Yeah. And I've been a wanderer all my life. Even as an adult, I'm a wanderer. I enjoy traveling and being exposed to other cultures. And when I go to other cultures as an adult, I'm really intrigued by the craftspeople, particularly woodworkers, textile craftspeople, and ceramics people. Although I'm not thrilled with ceramics myself, I don't think I have the temperament to deal with the mud and the clay and the kiln and waiting to see what it's going to look like. I'm more of an immediate type person. So I like to work in wood or in colors on wood. So it's more immediate to me. So I'm really intrigued by how artists around the world handle those different types of forms.
So I had a course at the illustrious Morgan State University on African diaspora, and you hear it mentioned in without it becoming a buzzword. I want to get your take on it and why is it important to capture like scenes of the African diaspora?
I didn't really approach it in terms of urgency or immediacy. It's just something that I took on as normal. But we do hear a lot about diaspora now. And diaspora is simply a word that means spread out. That's all it is.
Yeah.
So when you say African diaspora, you're talking about African people who just by any means of travel went to other parts of the world. That's what we're saying. That's what it is. Interestingly enough, before African diaspora became popular, Jewish diaspora was the term that was used a lot. And I understand there was some controversy when African Americans started using African diaspora because Jewish people thought that they owned that word. And you had some Black scholars that said, no, you don't own the word diaspora.
This is ours. Like, it is not.
You don't own the word diaspora. So, and now we hear it a lot. It's just it's a part of our culture. But essentially it means spread out. That's all it is.
And that element and just everyday scenes is like, I remember having this interview with Thomas James a while back, and it was about like that representation component or what have you. And it's like, why, going back to it, it's like, why is this important? It's important because it captures a real life situation for Black people, for people like you and I that a lot of times, and when he kind of broke down the numbers of curators and how that factors into what art is being seen and displayed and all of that, it's like, that's why it's important.
Yeah, you have to look at who's guarding the cultural gates, and you have to look at where the cultural gates exist. Right now, because we have such modern forms of technology, it's nothing to be able to connect with people immediately. But let's say 30 years ago, we didn't hear a lot about Black people from Britain. No. We didn't see a lot of them on television. So when I actually went to London, or when I went to Amsterdam and I saw all these people of color walking in the streets, I was blown away. I thought, I don't see this on my television. Why don't I know that people from Suriname are in Holland? Because, the Dutch people colonized other parts of the world, and those folks come back to where they were exposed. So I thought, okay, this is something that I would like to express, because I'm seeing it. I'm sure somebody else is seeing it. So let me just include it as part of my own experiences. So I'm not as shocked now when I go to, let's say, European countries and see people of color walking in the streets, because I'm thinking, okay, historically, yes, they got here. Train, plane, ship, however they travel, they got here. Yeah. And that should not be abnormal in terms of a visual vocabulary. This is something that I should be able to look at and say, okay, yes, I understand this. This is norm. What is not normal is to see, let's say, a television series that's supposed to be contemporary and you see no people of color. That should not be normal anymore.
Yeah. It's like you mentioned like Amsterdam. What is it? Curacao, have you? I always look back at I'm a baseball fan, and I would look back at the Atlanta Braves, and it's like Andrew Jones looks like a Black dude, and it's like, oh, he's from Curacao. I was like, oh. And as a kid, like, this is we're talking like 96, 97. I'm like, what? Where? What? Which part of America is that? Or which part of Africa is that? And now learning about the place, because if I don't know a place, I need to learn some more about it and get an idea of where are Black people at. And I think having work that is reflective of that, but in a normal sort of way, is important. Mm-hmm. And I outside of this, I do a movie review podcast, and I was joking about it. I ended up watching the movie Scream and looking at it like for reviews, this 25th anniversary. And one of the observations I took down was like, this is a very white movie. And it's this thing of like, can this be reshot or can this be redone right now? And you have to take that inventory right now. But if that movie, being that it's 25 years old, was done now, you got to have a few different people or types represented for it to feel like it's contemporary. It's modern.
Sure.
Describe the Barbershop series, and why did you create the series? And what are some of the techniques, or what are some of the techniques you utilize to bring the series together?
Barbershop series started on a dare. I was actually in the gym minding my own business. I was shaving my head, and this guy, this tall guy, like 6'3" brother, comes behind me and says, "What do you know about shaving heads?" I'm thinking, like, I shave my head every other day. What's with you, and who are you? Turns out he owns a barbershop. So we got to talking. I said, "Well, Matt, can I come into your shop and do some sketches? Because I'd like to capture some scenes from the barbershop." So he let me come in, and I spent some time in his shop taking sketches, doing some photographs, and I started painting. And I thought maybe I'd just do a couple of barbershop paintings, but I got into it. And every time I went back to the shop, I got another idea for a piece. So it became a series. And over time, I realized all of my images were coming from this one barbershop. I need to branch out. Let me try another shop. So I introduced myself to, over a period of 2 years, I ended up introducing myself to 7 or 8 different barbershops, mostly in Maryland, one in DC. I would go in and say, "Hey, I'm an artist. I'm working on a series. Can I take some images from your space? And I'll give you some images if you let me do this." So I am now working on, I have gotten, just before COVID, when everything shut down, I couldn't go back into the barbershops because everything was closed. I was on painting number 68.
Wow.
There are 68 pieces in the barbershop series right now. And my work is primarily acrylic with objects on wood. I used to paint on canvas, but I got to the point where I was abusing the canvas so badly. I was cutting and burning and shaping and whatnot. And I thought, I need a stronger foundation. So I thought, well, let me try wood. And I still consider myself a painter, not a sculptor per se, although I am shaping the wood. But I use the wood like a collagist would use paper. Mm-hmm. Rather, if you can imagine holding a piece of paper and cutting the edges and shaping it with scissors, I'm taking wood and cutting it and shaping it with power tools. Gotcha. That's basically what I'm doing. And I'm gouging into it, and I'm painting it, and I'm adding materials. I'm stitching into the wood, which is something I really like, because I'm stitching keys and other objects into the wood just as part of the narrative. And every time I use a key or a clock or a combination lock or another kind of key or lock, it adds to the narrative in a particular way. So at this point, people have started giving me keys. You know, everybody I know has got a key. They've had it for more than a year and they don't know what it belongs to. You don't want to give this key up. It's like, I've had this key for 10 years. One day I'm going to figure out what it opens up to. So people have started actually giving me keys, and those have become a part of my material along with the paint and the line drawings. So
that's interesting. I was thinking like it would be that one instance where someone's like, I gave away a key. I know what it's for now. Oh no. Hey, where's your art?
Yeah. Fortunately, that has not yet happened. But you know, thanks to technology, I've actually on a couple of occasions had people that I do not know from New Orleans and someone else from Delaware, someone else from Chicago. They said, hey, I've seen your work on Facebook. What is your mailing address? I'd like to send you a package. And okay, I'm not fearful that someone's going to send me a bomb or anything. So I send them the address so they can send this thing. And I've gotten packages of keys. Oh. People have like sent me keys. I also have a former colleague who now works, I guess I should not say where she works, but she oversees a series of libraries, and they were changing locks on all the buildings. And she said, well, I've got my janitor collected all these keys and he's going to throw them out. Would you like to have them? I said, yeah, send them on. Just give me these keys. like a boatload of keys just for that instance.
The key master.
And what I learned from the barbershops is barbershops are pretty consistent in what they have, but every shop is different. You got to have the chair, you got to have the barber, you got to have a customer. You got to have the razors, you got to have the hair products, you got to have all that stuff. But the way that appears in every shop is very different. And that's what I appreciated in spending some time. It was also pushing the boundaries for me because I did not spend a lot of time in barbershops when I was a kid. I didn't have that kind of hair, and my family just kind of cut my hair with scissors or, a razor, but I didn't spend a lot of time in the barbershop. So I can't talk about, memories of going to the barbershop with my dad and being surrounded by other men in the neighborhood. I didn't have that. But in sitting in that environment as an adult, I got it. I understood it because the first guy that let me sit into a shop is very much a part of his community. Although his shop is in Baltimore, he's originally from New York. So he's a transplant, but his shop is really rooted in his community. And as I sat and watched him operate, and also there were 3 other chairs in that shop. So I watched those barbers work with their clientele as well. They knew their customers. Now, interestingly enough, they may not know their customers by name, but they know them in other ways. Mm-hmm. They know all about their background. They know who's dating who's married to who's got kids, whose kids are going to graduate, whose kids are going on to college. They know all this information, but they may not know them by name. Yeah. They also know them by heads. Yes. So I can go back and say, that guy whose head was kind of like at this angle. And, oh, yeah, I know him. He comes on Saturday, usually at 3:00.
That's funny. That's the thing. That's important. Like, I know when I go there, and I go to my barber, and he's like, look, man, I want to do this with your hair moving forward. I don't know about this. It's like, it's a consultation thing. And I'm like, look, man, this is a 20-minute haircut. Just go down to a none. Because I'm not quite ready to shave it yet. I just go down really low.
Yeah, I've had that experience too. In fact, one of my friends is funny. He said, look, stop looking like Bozo. Just go ahead and shave your entire head.
I can't do. I mean, I'm trying to keep the beard in, and I already was told I have like daddy or uncle energy, and it's like I don't have a kid. I'm barely an uncle. I don't. So I read that your work, and you touched on it actually, is mixed media is a component, if someone were to call it that, mixed media assemblage,
right.
And puppetry. Which part do you enjoy doing the most? And I remember you mentioning the stitching piece, but which part of that process, of any of your processes, do you enjoy doing the most?
I don't know that I can think of them as most, because they're both a part of who I am. I wouldn't do one without the other. Okay. There is some transferable technique that goes between the art making, the assemblage, and the puppetry, because when you're constructing the puppet, you're still dealing with line, color, form, shape. And you're also, in my case, I'm also sculpting. When I'm dealing with my artwork, with the assemblages, I'm still dealing with line, form, shape, color, and I'm also creating forms. So I wouldn't choose one over the other. Now, I can say that the effects are very different, because with puppetry, you're performing with an audience, and I do appreciate that. I appreciate seeing how puppets bring out different things in people in their, particularly in the audience. Everyone responds to a puppet very differently. And so it's interesting to me just to watch that dynamic. Because when I perform, I'm in full view, but I'm dressed in all black. So the puppet actually interacts with whoever's there. And you forget me. The puppet actually takes on their own characteristics. So you get a lot of information from people with a puppet.
Yes.
You can learn some things about people with a puppet.
I mean, my partner, she is afraid of puppets, so that's one thing. And then,
what? That's interesting, because we recently did a film shoot with a woman who owned a production company, and we had to go to film a puppet show. This is a 30-minute puppet show, and I'm operating 10 different puppets in the show. She admitted from the very beginning that she was terrified of puppets since the very beginning, since early childhood. She was terrified of puppets, and I said, okay, well, I'm not going to push your boundaries here, but I do have a pup that you might be comfortable with. This is Mr. Zeke. He's an older guy, dark skin, white hair, slow talking, just kind of really friendly. Hey, dog, how you doing? I'm really happy to be here with you today. We're going to do a show. This woman ended up kissing Mr. Zeke by the time we finished. She gave him a kiss. Now, she did give him a kiss, and she freaked out afterwards, but we got it on camera. She kissed Mr. Zeke.
That's fantastic. I mean, I'm a little bit of a troll, so I'm like, hey, remember Tales from the Hood? It's just like, don't you dare. Troll just a little bit. And that's what I do. So you mentioned traveling is a thing for you. It's important. And I enjoy traveling as well. Get dipped in a different culture and you learn something. And I think that's what's really important. Are there some destinations that come to mind when you think of places that had a profound impact on you creatively?
Creatively, I would say Haiti and West Africa. In West Africa, Mali, I was really drawn to the rustic nature, the desert, and the textiles. And also, Mali has a very strong culture in puppetry. So on one of my trips, I went specifically to look for puppets in Mali and learned a lot about how Africans handle puppetry. It's very different from European puppetry. So I really appreciated that and incorporated some of those techniques in how I perform. It's just kind of freed me up to think about how you work a puppet with an audience. Because now, although I don't do this particular example, there used to be boys' clubs in West Africa, and as part of their service to the community, when they weren't helping with the harvest, they would put on puppet shows. And in the Niger area, these puppet shows would take place on the river in a canoe. So the canoe itself would be sculpted in such a way that the back of the puppet would be an ox. These guys would be under the ox, and they would operate these puppets from the back of the ox or through the back of the ox on a canoe in the river.
Oh, wow.
I was just blown away with that whole concept. So the audience is standing on the banks of the river watching, and usually it happens late afternoon or in the dark. So all of this mystery happens because of the lighting. Yeah. At the same time, you have chanters and drummers and maybe a storyteller, all working together in collaboration to this performance. And that just really, really excited me in terms of possibilities with puppetry.
That's great.
You know what? I want to, before we forget about barbershops, I wanted to add one thing that I learned in my research. I was intrigued by how barbers became a profession in America. And it turns out that it started during the colonial period. When white men of means wanted to imitate European aristocracy, they needed to have a man in waiting who would handle their hair and their face. So they allowed enslaved Black men to shave their face and their head. And these men took that and ran with it as a profession. They became, within that system, they became rather elite because they had access to things that other Black people didn't have access to, i.e. men of wealth. Sitting in this environment, talking to each other, they learned a lot of information just by eavesdropping on conversations. At the same time, these guys are having a razor to their throat and to their head, shaving their head and their faces. Later on, freed Black men took on barbering as a profession because white males thought it was beneath them to cut somebody else's hair. So they ran with it and it became a profession.
Wow. I had no idea of that. So I feel like obviously I've learned a lot so far, but I've learned that, and that's great. I'm going to throw that out in the barbershop one day. It's like, yeah, man, y'all were kings, man. Come on, brother, pass that along. There's the affirmation.
They were one of the earliest professions of Black people in the U.S. One of the earliest, unions, barber unions.
We know hair. That's the thing. I mean, that's entrenched there, like legitimately, like stamped, approved. Now here's the last question I have before I get into shameless plugs. Yeah, I don't hold people too long. It's just like, hey, wham, bam, here's your 30 minutes. Let's get it in. I read that the story pertaining to individual pieces is ending. What's one thing or a few things that you want the audience to take away from your work as an artist, like your body of work as an artist thus far?
My works are what I call open-ended narratives, and they're open-ended because there's never one story. I came across a phrase a long time ago that I like, and it's Allah delights in many kinds of truth and varying degrees of truth, but even Allah does not like the entire truth. So to me, that means there's never one story.
Yeah.
So when people are looking at my work, many times if they don't know who I am, I like to eavesdrop before they find out who I am and listen in on conversations, because if they don't know that the artist is around, you can get some unfiltered feedback, and that's really great.
Yes.
I think one of the more precious comments I gotten was two teenage girls who were looking at a barbershop piece, and they said, "That's really strange, but it's cute."
It's almost like that line on the back of the movie is just like strange but cute.
Yeah, it's like, yeah, that's really strange. And I knew that in her vocabulary that meant this is a really nice piece, but it's unusual. It's not something she's seen before. So to answer your question, I would invite people to have what I call a slow look at the pieces and spend some time with it and just see what it says to you. Sometimes when I have these eavesdropping sessions, what I come up with has been far richer than what I had in mind in the first place. And I thought, okay, this is fodder for the next piece. I can take that idea and stretch it and go somewhere else with it. So thank you for that input.
That's fantastic. It's one of those things that it's important, because I've interviewed a fair amount of like artists, and they'll say, "Oh, I'm never around to know." And it's like, that does that matter to you? Or, you know, and that's the thing, but being able to get that kind of take the look this way, take a slower look at it and really be able to appreciate and get depth, be, you know, immersed in it, and then kind of go from there. Like, I remember going to the Bright exhibit, and I think I went 2 or 3 times, and I went with different people each time, and I was just appreciating different pieces, you know, each time. And generally it's like, oh, let me just do this pass real quick and absorb it that way. And it's like, no, this is not fast food. This art's not fast food. You have to, this is a full course meal.
Yeah.
You got to be able to slow that down.
Yeah, that's a good analogy.
Yeah.
That's a good analogy.
So that's all the questions that I have. But what I would like to invite for you is the opportunity to shamelessly plug whatever, your social media, all of that stuff, website, whatever.
I'm on Facebook. The name is Schroeder Cherry, SCHROEDER, cherry, just like the tree. I'm also on Instagram. So hit me up, take a look. I also have a portfolio on what's called Baker Artists Portfolio. So you can go to that and see a boatload of works, both puppets and assemblages. So if you see something that you like, or even if you don't like it, contact me. Let me know. I don't really care if you don't like it. Let's have a conversation. What about it intrigues you?
Yeah, that's big. That's big. It's big to have that feedback. Feedback is important. And it's like, yeah, let's have a discourse around this. I don't like it. Hard stop. It's like, no, let's have a discourse. Tell me more.
Yeah.
So thank you so much. This has been a treat. And yeah, I'll do my sign offs.
Thank you, Rob.
Yeah, totally. So for Schroeder Cherry, I'm Rob Lee saying that there's art in and around Baltimore. You just got to look for it.